There was a time when doctors believed the cure for madness was to drill into the skull and scramble the brain, when the remedy for illness was to open a vein and let blood pour onto the floor. This is the story of when medicine was deadly. For thousands of years, humanity suffered in darkness, trying to heal itself without understanding how the body worked. The human body was a mystery, and disease was seen as punishment, possession, or imbalance. Doctors weren't scientists, they were philosophers, priests, and often desperate men grasping at theories. One of the oldest and most widespread treatments was bloodletting. The belief was simple: too much blood caused illness, so removing it would restore balance. It was practiced in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, and continued well into the 19th century. Doctors used lancets, leeches, and even special bowls designed to catch the flowing blood. George Washington himself died after doctors drained nearly half his blood trying to cure a throat infection. He was killed not by disease, but by the very men sworn to save him. But bloodletting would eventually pale in comparison to what came next. In the 1930s, a Portuguese neurologist named Antonio Egas Moniz had an idea. He believed that mental illness was caused by faulty connections in the brain's frontal lobe. His solution was to sever those connections, physically cutting into the brain to cure madness. He called it the lobotomy. The procedure was shockingly crude. Doctors would drill holes into the skull, or in some cases, insert an ice pick through the eye socket. They would then move it back and forth, destroying brain tissue with no precision, no imaging, no real understanding. Patients were awake for some of these procedures. One of the most infamous practitioners was Walter Freeman, an American physician who toured the country performing lobotomies. He traveled in a van he called the lobotomobile, offering the surgery to hospitals, asylums, and desperate families. He performed over 3,000 lobotomies, sometimes doing several in a single day. Many patients lost their ability to feel, to think, to be fully human. They became docile, emotionless, sometimes unable to care for themselves. Rosemary Kennedy, sister of President John F. Kennedy, was one of them. At 23, she underwent a lobotomy to control her mood swings. She was left unable to walk or speak intelligibly for the rest of her life. The lobotomy was not medicine. It was mutilation disguised as science. And yet, Antonio Egas Moniz won the Nobel Prize in 1949 for developing it. By the 1950s, the horrors became undeniable. Public outcry grew, psychiatric medications were developed, and slowly the lobotomy faded into history. But not before tens of thousands had been irreversibly damaged. These weren't isolated mistakes. They were accepted practices endorsed by institutions, taught in medical schools. The doctors who performed them believed they were helping. That's what makes it so chilling. They thought they were heroes. So why did this happen? Part of it was ignorance. The human brain was poorly understood, and mental illness was seen as something shameful. Families wanted quick fixes, institutions wanted manageable patients, and in the absence of real solutions, dangerous ones took root. Bloodletting persisted because it seemed logical within the framework of the time. Lobotomies spread because they were fast, cheap, and made difficult patients quiet. There was little oversight, no informed consent, and no accountability. Medicine was built on trial and error, but the errors were borne by the most vulnerable. The patients had no voice. Many were women, children, the poor, the mentally ill. They were treated as problems to solve, not people to care for. The shift came not from morality alone, but from science. With better understanding of the brain, new medications, and ethical standards, medicine began to evolve. But it took decades and countless lives. Today, we look back in horror. We ask how something so brutal could have been so widespread. But the truth is, every generation is blind to its own cruelty until hindsight reveals it. We trust institutions. We trust authority. We trust the person in the white coat, and when that trust is misplaced, the consequences are devastating. The legacy of these practices lives on in medical ethics, in patient rights, in informed consent laws. They exist because of what happened when they didn't. Medicine has come a long way, but it came at a cost we should never forget. The drills have been put away, the ice picks are in museums, but the lives lost, the minds destroyed, the trust broken, those can never be undone. This is what happens when medicine forgets its first rule: do no harm. This is why we must always remember when medicine was deadly.